We all agree that Jeffrey Epstein was a total, complete piece of human debris, a predatory, evil criminal who inflicted unspeakable harm on vulnerable underage girls and deserved far worse than he actually got. Again, that also does not mean that the Trump administration is now lying. It doesn't mean all our questions are answered or that evidence has been provided to answer all of it. I want to actually spend some time going back through the case and examining the legitimate questions. And again, there were and are legitimate questions. And then we can discuss the rational possibilities, knowing what we know. So let's begin with a basic timeline of this case. So in March 2005, in Palm Beach, there was an investigation opened into Jeffrey Epstein. The family of an underage girl reported molestation. According to the Miami Herald, quote, a 14-year-old girl and her parents report that Jeffrey Epstein molested her at a mansion in Palm Beach. She said a female acquaintance and classmate at Royal Palm Beach High School had taken her to the house to give him a massage in exchange for money. On October 20th, 2005, the Palm Beach police executed a search warrant for Epstein's home. Police believe that Epstein was already tipped off because his computers were gone at the time. In 2006, May 2006, Palm Beach charged Epstein with unlawful sex with a minor. It was based on a probable cause affidavit signed by the Palm Beach police. In July 2006, he was arrested by the Palm Beach police, but the grand jury only indicted on one charge, solicitation of prostitution. There was no indication in that particular indictment that the victims in question were minors. The FBI also opened a federal investigation. In August 2007, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Alex Acosta, entered talks with Epstein's lawyers about a plea bargain on the federal charge and on the state charges. September 24th, 2007, Epstein signed a non-prosecution agreement. Okay, this was titled later the Sweetheart Deal or the Deal of the Century. There are big stories about this when Alex Acosta was Secretary of Labor. Epstein's court appearance was delayed by his lawyers with further negotiations until June 2008. Among the terms that were agreed upon were that victims would not be notified and the non-prosecution agreement would be sealed. The terms were that Epstein would plead guilty in Florida to 2 counts of prostitution charges, one of which involved a minor. He got 18 months in jail, plus 12 months of house arrest. No federal prosecution of any co-conspirators, and the victims were not informed of the deal. We'll talk about this in a little bit as to why that sweetheart deal got cut and what the available evidence suggests. June 30th, 2008, Epstein pled guilty to state charges, but the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed not to prosecute federally, even after the federal government had prepared a 53-page indictment. And as we say, that included 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of solicitation of prostitution with a minor under the age of 18 who's registered as convicted sex offender in Florida. In July of 2008, the victims learned of the plea deal after the fact. They actually filed an emergency petition. They forced the federal government to comply with the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which mandates the right to be informed about plea deals and to appear at sentencing. August 2008, the victims sought to have Epstein's plea deal unsealed. Federal prosecutors battled them because of the terms of the already agreed upon non-prosecution agreement. Again in October, Epstein began his work release program. He was transported to an office in Palm Beach during the day to work and then returned to the Palm Beach County Jail in the evenings to sleep. In July of 2009, Epstein was released from Palm Beach County Jail 5 months early, and he was supposed to finish his sentence on house arrest. He was making frequent trips to New York City and the U.S. Virgin Islands, even though he was supposed to be confined to his Palm Beach home. And again, should this raise your hackles and suspicions? Abso-freaking-lutely. Of course it should. August 2009, the federal NPA is now made public. About a dozen civil lawsuits are filed by women alleging underage molestation. In November of 2009, Epstein's former butler, a guy named Alfredo Rodriguez, was busted trying to sell a black book with the names of girls and women. And that book later became part of the public record as part of civil lawsuits. In April 2010, there were flight logs obtained from those civil lawsuits against Epstein. But the names known publicly are only from court records, which mention prominent names amid proceedings. And again, these are all people who either flew aboard the Epstein plane or visited Epstein at Epstein Island or friends and associates with Epstein. This included Bill Clinton, President Trump, Prince Andrew, Kevin Spacey, Naomi Campbell, Glenn Dubin, Jean-Luc Brunel, Alan Dershowitz, Ghislaine Maxwell, Lex Wessner, David Copperfield, Chris Tucker, and Stephen Hawking. In March of 2011, 2 Epstein victims filed a motion in federal court accusing the government of violating their rights by not notifying them of Epstein's plea deal, and they sought the invalidation of the plea deal. In September of 2011, U.S. District Judge Kenneth Mara handed the victims a victory and rejected the federal government's argument that they didn't have an obligation to notify the victims in the absence of a federal charge. And Epstein had to register as a sex offender in New York State as well. In 2012, Epstein starts making large donations toward scientific research, world peace, cancer research, through his own foundations. He gave Harvard $9 million, MIT $850,000, the International Peace Institute $650,000. Fast forward to 2015, January 2015, and this is where things start to spin out into allegations about third parties. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who was one of the alleged victims, and there's a picture of her with Prince Andrew and Epstein. She filed a sworn affidavit that Epstein forced her to have sex with Prince Andrew and Ellen Dershowitz when she was underage. She also alleged that Ghislaine Maxwell worked as Epstein's madam. In April of 2015, a federal judge ruled that Giuffre could not join the Federal Crime Victims' Rights Act lawsuit. In September of that year, she filed lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell for defamation in federal court. Giuffre would later settle this suit with Maxwell for an undisclosed sum in June 2017. Several civil suits were also filed around the same time alleging an Epstein-Maxwell international sex trafficking operation. As we'll get to in a little bit, it is Giuffre who is the source of the suggestion that people other than Maxwell and Epstein were the people for whom the girls were being procured. Because, as we'll talk about, the case against Maxwell is not about Maxwell trafficking girls to Prince Andrew. The case is about her trafficking girls for herself and for Epstein. November 2018, the Miami Herald revisited the case, and they focused on Acosta because he was now the new Trump cabinet secretary of labor. And so there's a huge report about this plea deal, this sweetheart plea deal. In July of 2019, Epstein was arrested in New York on federal sex trafficking charges. The charges were sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. Acosta resigned as the Secretary of Labor that same month. The FBI executed a search of Epstein's Upper East Side townhouse, and Epstein pled not guilty. On July 24th, he was placed on suicide watch 2 weeks prior to his death after being found unconscious in his cell with neck injuries. He was then removed idiotically from suicide watch after being evaluated by a psychologist, so great job, psychologist. August 10th, he was found dead in his cell. August 12th, 2019, the FBI raided Epstein Island. August 27th, 2019, a federal judge gave 23 Epstein accusers their day in court. The next year, 2020, July 2nd, Ghislaine Maxwell was charged on federal sex crimes. Those charges included enticement of minors, sex trafficking, and perjury, and she pled not guilty. She was convicted at the end of the following year. Count 1, conspiracy to entice a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts with Epstein. Count 3, conspiracy to transport a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. Count 4, transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. Count 5, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of minors. And count 6, sex trafficking of minors. She was sentenced to 20 years in 2022. On March 27, 2023, the U.S. Southern District of New York requested review of photos and videos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. In June 2023, the DOJ Office of the Inspector General released a report on Epstein's custody and supervision in jail, including information about the video cameras, Epstein's first apparent suicide attempt, and suicide watch, the items found in his cell, and an evaluation of negligence on behalf of the prison guards and staff. And they found at the time, of course, that Epstein killed himself. July 1st, 2024, newly released transcripts from the 2006 Florida grand jury, which was made public with some redactions because of Governor DeSantis modifying state law to allow for that particular circumstance. Those were released. Okay, now, fast forward to this year. On February 27th, the DOJ announced a file release, right? This is the day where everybody walked out with the binders. And the DOJ, under Pam Bondi, said the first phase of files released today sheds light on Epstein. Okay, quote, the Department of Justice is following through on President Trump's commitment to transparency and lifting the veil on the disgusting actions of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. The first phase of files released today sheds light on Epstein's extensive network and begins to provide the public with long overdue accountability. And FBI Director Kash Patel also put out a statement, quote, the FBI is entering a new era, one that will be defined by integrity, accountability, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Okay, now, the big problem was that immediately upon the release of these binders, it turns out it was all filled with stuff we already knew. So what did Attorney General Bondi do? She then requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein from the FBI and suggested that there was some sort of mess up with the FBI. Right? She sent a letter to the FBI that same day requesting additional files. Quote, before you came into office, I requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. In response to this request, I received approximately 200 pages of documents, which consisted primarily of flight logs, Epstein's list of contacts, and a list of victims' names and phone numbers. I repeatedly questioned whether this was the full set of documents responsive to my request and was repeatedly assured by the FBI we had received the full set of documents. I am directing you to conduct an immediate investigation into why my order to the FBI was not followed. So it looks like Pam Bondi was trying to sort of shift blame onto Kash Patel and the FBI for not turning over documents. All right, fine. But there was no actual evidence that the FBI was doing that. Right? Kash Patel responded. He said, well, we'll turn it over as we get it. All right, fine. Okay, July 6th, 2025, that is when the DOJ memo comes out. And I want to read you again the DOJ memo so we know exactly what it says, and what it does not. This is the memo, quote, as part of our commitment to transparency, the Department of Justice and the FBI have conducted an exhaustive review of investigative holdings relating to Jeffrey Epstein. To ensure that the review was thorough, the FBI conducted digital searches of its databases, hard drives, and network drives, as well as physical searches of squad areas, locked cabinets, desks, closets, and other areas where responsive material may have been stored. These searches uncovered a significant amount of material, including more than 300 gigabytes of data and physical evidence. The files related to Epstein include a large volume of images of Epstein, images and videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minors, and over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal child sex abuse material and other pornography. Teams of agents, analysts, attorneys, and privacy and civil liberties experts combed through the digital and documentary evidence with the aim of providing as much information as possible to the public while simultaneously protecting victims. Much of the material is subject to court-ordered sealing. Only a fraction of this material would have been aired publicly had Epstein gone to trial, as the seal served only to protect victims and did not expose any additional third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. Again, that is, okay, that last point there is the crucial point. And the seal on this material was not designed to prevent the exposure of additional third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. Through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of those materials and will not permit the release of child pornography. This systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Okay, so they're saying it right out. And they're saying we've seen all the evidence. No, I have not seen the evidence. You have not seen the evidence. They have seen the evidence. So again, either Bondi, Patel, Bongino, Trump, J.D. Vance, they're all lying, or they've seen evidence that you have not seen. So you can make the case that they're lying. Go for it. But at least say that that's what you're saying, okay? At least be clear about what you're accusing people of. Consistent with prior disclosures, says the DOJ, this review confirmed that Epstein harmed over 1,000 victims. Each suffered unique trauma. Sensitive information relating to these victims is intertwined throughout the materials. This includes specific details such as victim names and likenesses, physical descriptions, places of birth, associates, and employment history. One of our highest priorities is combating child exploitation and bringing justice to victims. Perpetuating unfounded theories about Epstein serves neither of those ends. To that end, says the DOJ, while we have labored to provide the public with maximum information regarding Epstein and ensured examination of any evidence in the government's possession, it is the determination of the DOJ and FBI that no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. After a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City on August 10th, 2019. This conclusion is consistent with previous findings, including the August 19th, 2019 autopsy findings of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the 2019 position of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the SDNY in connection with the investigation of federal correctional officers responsible for guarding Epstein, and the June 2023 conclusions of the DOJ's Office of the Inspector General. The conclusion, Epstein died by suicide, is further supported by video footage from the common area of the special housing unit where Epstein was housed at the time of his death. As the DOJ's Inspector General explained in 2023, anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located from the SHU common area would have been captured by this footage. The FBI's independent review of this footage confirmed that from the time Epstein was locked in his cell at around 10:40 p.m. on August 9th, 2019, until around 6:30 a.m. the next morning, nobody entered any of the tiers in the SHU. During this review, the FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing color, and improving its sharpness for greater clarity and viewability. The full, raw, and enhanced videos are available at the following links, and then the link is included. That's the end of the DOJ memo. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, the system isn't broken. It's rigged. Banks get rich while you stay buried in debt. Well, it's not an accident. That's actually the plan. PDS Debt has helped hundreds of thousands of people flip the script on credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, high interest traps. They know how to beat these companies at their own game. Your money, your future. It's time to take it back with PDS Debt. PDS Debt doesn't just crunch numbers and call it a day. They actually take the time to understand your specific situation and build a plan that works for you, not some cookie cutter approach. And here's the best part. They don't care what your credit score looks like. Whether it's pristine or completely shot, they're focused on one thing, helping you save more money, crush your debt faster, and finally start keeping more of what you earn instead of handing it over to your creditors every month. They've built their reputation by actually delivering results. That's why they have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, thousands of 5-star Google reviews, perfect scores on Trustpilot. When you're drowning in debt, you need someone in your corner who knows how to fight back. That's exactly what PDS Debt does for their clients every single day. Now, I have friends who are in debt. It is the worst, absolutely the worst. But you are 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment. Find the best option for yourself right now at pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. That's pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. Alrighty, so now let's get to the big questions. Here. So let's start with Ghislaine Maxwell. Here are the facts about Ghislaine Maxwell. She was convicted for her role in recruiting, grooming, trafficking underage girls for the sexual abuse of Jeffrey Epstein, of Epstein himself. Epstein, in the case against Maxwell, was identified as the main perpetrator. There were no named third parties in the charges. The charges did not identify any third parties in the allegations about Maxwell. So this raises the question, because, of course, this entire case and sort of the public speculation has been all about who were the third parties to whom all of these young girls were trafficked who were not Epstein and Maxwell, right? That's what separates this case from the Diddy case. The Diddy case was supposed to be Diddy stooping a bunch of people, and it wasn't really about the third parties doing the stooping. It was about Diddy. This case was supposedly different because it included supposedly every powerful person you know stooping an underage girl. So who alleged the involvement of third parties? The only person who really full-scale alleged the involvement of third parties was Virginia Giuffre. She claimed that Maxwell and Epstein told her to have sex with Epstein's powerful friends and associates, including people like Prince Andrew, Senator George Mitchell, and Alan Dershowitz. She did not provide any supporting evidence of these allegations about anyone but Epstein and Prince Andrew, with whom she took a photo, and Maxwell in London. Prince Andrew settled a civil lawsuit. That civil lawsuit did not admit guilt. He was in the middle of a big bust-up in England at the time. So in settlement cases, very often, if you don't admit guilt in a settlement case, that means you're not admitting guilt. So maybe he did, maybe he didn't. The problem for Giuffre, and for people who are saying that there was this giant list of third parties involved, is she had serious credibility problems. She apparently changed lots of details about these instances many times, including even the age at which she met Jeffrey Epstein. She gave a deposition in 2016 in which she contradicted earlier statements about interactions with individuals, including Bill Clinton, including her allegations that she had been in a helicopter with him. She then changed it and said she had not. She also dropped her claims against Alan Dershowitz, saying that she may have made a mistake. Prosecutors did not include her allegations in the case against Ghislaine Maxwell because they did not find her credible. And of course, she ended up having significant mental issues, and she ended up dying very untimely death, young. Then there was Sarah Ransom. This is another one of the alleged victims. She alleged that Maxwell and Epstein trafficked girls to Epstein's, quote, colleagues and powerful men, including Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Richard Branson. Here's the problem. She later admitted she made up the claims of possessing any evidence to support those allegations. She ended up suing Epstein and Maxwell. She settled out of court. She claimed she was sexually trafficked when she was 22, that she was threatened, and that her passport was removed to get her to have sex with Epstein and Maxwell. But again, the allegations about third parties, unsubstantiated. There's a woman named Johanna Schoberg. She testified about being present with Giuffre and Prince Andrew and Maxwell. She said that Prince Andrew acted inappropriately. She did not allege that Maxwell trafficked her to third parties. Now, we have to ask the question, why exactly was the original Epstein criminal case settled? And again, the speculation is because there was something nefarious going on other than just horrifyingly bad prosecutorial discretion being used. Well, originally, as we've said, Epstein settled under a non-prosecution agreement, an NPA. He was facing a 53-page federal indictment for sexually abusing dozens of underage girls. Prosecutors instead pursued solicitation of prostitution and procurement of minors for prostitution. The NPA didn't just protect Epstein, it protected 4 named co-conspirators and any unnamed co-conspirators. And again, he served just months in county jail, much of it on work release. So why did that happen? Well, Alex Acosta, who was the DA, and his team, apparently they believed that the priority was getting him registered as a sex offender, and that was somehow better than running through a trial that may have ended the way that P. Diddy's case did. He also claimed it would have put underage girls through trauma. Now, there were multiple DOJ reviews of this decision, and they found no evidence that Acosta's decision was motivated by corruption, Epstein's wealth, status, or associations. Now, the DOJ did conclude that Acosta exercised poor judgment, but they did not conclude that he committed professional misconduct or acted under improper influence or anything. So this raised the question of whether the real reason that he was given this sort of sweetheart deal is because he was some form of intelligence agent or asset. So literally the only person who is involved in this case at a clear level who has ever supposedly implied or suggested that Epstein was an intel asset was Acosta, and Acosta never actually did it in the first person. What do I mean by that? Well, allegedly, he claimed that he was told by higher officials that Epstein had to sort of be let off because he was of importance to the government and to leave it alone. Except that Acosta never actually made that claim. The only source for that allegation is the rather untrustworthy reporter Vicky Ward, who attributed it to a person who supposedly had heard it from Acosta. So it was an anonymous person quoting Acosta. Acosta's been asked about it in the past, and Acosta has never confirmed it. He apparently decided to resolve the case through a plea arrangement before the federal investigation had concluded, and when he was asked if Epstein belonged to intelligence in a congressional hearing, he refused to comment. He actually said, quote, "There has been reporting to that effect. Let me say, there's been reports to a lot of effects in this case, not just now, but over the years. And again, I would hesitate to take this reporting as fact. There was a 2020 DOJ report on this question, and it said it found, quote, no evidence suggesting Epstein was such a cooperating witness or an intelligence asset." Remember, that was President Trump's DOJ at the time, not Joe Biden's, not the Democrats. Zero governments, U.S. or otherwise, have acknowledged Epstein as an intelligence asset. Now, again, the skeptical are going to say, well, if the cover-up goes high enough, of course they're not going to acknowledge he's an intelligence. I get it. I totally get it. But let's be clear. This is coming from speculation. And that speculation is rooted in the fact that Epstein's properties were wired with hidden cameras and that witnesses reported surveillance footage that was monitored and stored. Okay, well, P. Diddy did the same thing, apparently, right? He was taping a lot of this sort of stuff. Does that mean that he was also an intelligence asset? Maybe, but you have no evidence of that. Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, Robert Maxwell, is also alleged to have been part of this because he apparently had ties to Israeli intelligence. So because the co-conspirator in this case had a father with ties to intelligence, somehow that means that Epstein and Maxwell were working for intelligence. And yeah, there's suspicious facts surrounding Epstein. I mean, I'm not, like, no one's defending Epstein. He apparently had an Austrian passport that was found with a false name and a Saudi address. All of that's super suspicious. Again, all of that was known by the DOJ when they came to that conclusion. And they have more information than I do, and then you do, and that anybody does, at least in the non-legal sphere. Epstein's case, by the way, about that passport was that he needed the passport because he traveled to a lot of countries where Jews are not allowed, and so he had to use this false passport with a false name to get into Saudi, whatever. It's probably BS, but who the hell knows? I don't know. That's the point. I'm willing to leave open questions where I don't have the answer. Okay, so the biggest question to me always was how Epstein made his money, right? Because this tied into the idea that he must have been some sort of intelligence asset, was that he never made money any other way. It's unclear where his money came from. Therefore, he must have been blackmailing people for his cash or being paid by a foreign government or the American government in order to honey trap people. So his business career is super checkered. And when you start to look at how he allegedly made his money, what you start to see here is something that kind of looks like a sort of Bernie Madoff scam artist who runs around with rich people and takes their money and then uses that to commit massive amounts of sex crime with minors. So he apparently started working at Bear Stearns in the 1970s. He was a limited partner by 1980. He founded a consulting firm called the International Assets Group, Intercontinental Assets Group. They claimed to recover stolen money for wealthy clients. He worked with a guy named Stephen Hoffenberg at the Towers Financial Corporation. Later, that was exposed as a Ponzi scheme. It's not clear that he was totally involved in that or how involved he was. He went on to found something called the Financial Trust Company. It apparently had one client, a guy named Leslie Wexner, who was the co-founder or founder of Victoria's Secret. And that was the basis for his wealth. Wexner gave him a lot of money to provide unspecified financial services. And later, he would accuse Epstein of misappropriating vast sums of money for his personal use. Epstein also received like $170 million from Leon Black for tax and estate planning services. So what does this sort of stuff look like? It looks like maybe he's facilitating money fraud, tax crime, that sort of stuff. Deutsche Bank was fined $150 million for compliance failures related to Epstein. JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank settled lawsuits alleging they benefited from his illegal activities. By the way, this would also explain why Epstein was always trying to hobnob with famous and rich people, because if you get one rich person to invest in you, you use that person as cover to hobnob with other famous and rich people. So basically kind of Sam Bankman-Fried, but with more underage sex crime. Is a plausible theory here. Okay, now we get to the question of whether Epstein killed himself. Now, the DOJ has run multiple investigations finding that Epstein killed himself unanimously. The DOJ and Bureau of Prisons put out that tape, where we talked about this tape, and in our comment section yesterday, there were a lot of people asking why I didn't talk about the minute of tape that was missing. So the allegation here, subscriber shout out, producer Sarah said there were a lot of subs who were upset in the chat that I didn't cover this. I was waiting for more information and a response from the Trump administration. And this is one of the things about this show. I will wait for information to arise that actually answers a question rather than just asking the same question 10 times and then ignoring the evidence when it comes in. So I'd rather wait to find out the actual answer than to give you an answer that I don't know the truth of or that I think is false without telling you that it's speculation. Okay, so the camera angle that was released did not include Epstein's cell because there were two other cameras, this is all in the public reporting, that malfunctioned that night. The available footage, according to the DOJ, would have covered anyone going in and out of Epstein's cell. So Epstein's cell door is just out of the vision of that particular camera. So basically, imagine a hallway. The entry point for the door has to go through that hallway. So if you give me a video of the hallway, I can tell, unless somebody was glued to the ceiling above the camera, then you can tell if somebody's going in or out. The basic idea was that the camera reset itself every night, and so every single tape from this particular facility had that 1-minute glitch in it. The results of the DOJ Office of the Inspector General 2023 investigations had, quote, recorded video evidence for August 9th and 10th for the SHU area where Epstein was housed was only available from one prison security camera due to a malfunction of MCC New York's digital video recorder system that occurred July 29, 2019. While the prison cameras continued to provide live video feeds, recordings were made for only about half the cameras. MCC New York personnel discovered this failure August 8, 2019. It was not repaired until after Epstein's death. As detailed in that report, like so many other BOP facilities, MCC New York had a history of security camera problems. I mean, not a shock. Government agencies suck at everything. The available recorded video footage from the one SHU camera captured a large part of the common area of the SHU, portions of the stairways leading to the different SHU tiers, including Epstein's cell tier. Thus, anyone entering or attempting to enter Epstein's SHU tier from the SHU common area would have been picked up by that video camera. Epstein's cell door was not in the camera's field of vision. The OIG reviewed the video and found that between 10:40 p.m., August 9th, 6:30 a.m., August 10th, no one was seen entering Epstein's cell tier from that SHU common area. The OIG determined that movements captured on video before and after those times were generally consistent with employee actions as described by witnesses and documented in BOP reports. So that's what we know. And again, I don't know the answer to every question. You don't know the answer to, no one knows the answer to all of these questions. But I know people who have way more access to all the evidence than I do. I know them personally. People like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and President Trump and JD Vance. They all have access to information that I do not have and you do not have. So maybe they're all lying to me. Maybe they're all in on it. If people are suggesting that's the case, they should just say it out loud. Because it's kind of playing footsie with calling all these people liars. Oh, we're not really calling you a liar. We're just saying, we're not really. If you want to call them liars, go ahead and call them liars. Call them liars, go ahead. Or say that they're coming to a premature conclusion and then provide your evidence that you have more evidence than they do. But here's my thing about all of this. If all of these people, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, President Trump, JD Vance, if they all told me precisely the opposite conclusion, I would also believe them because they have evidence that I don't have. If they came out and said precisely the opposite, Jeffrey Epstein was a CIA agent or a Mossad asset, and that he was blackmailing prominent people for money, and then the federal government was covering all that up. If they told me all of that, I would also believe them because they have more access to the evidence than I do. This is the nature of unfalsifiability and following the evidence where it leads. If you are so committed to the conspiracy theory that new evidence or people you find credible telling you a thing who have access to that evidence don't change your inputs like at all, then you've already decided on your conclusion. And that's not a great way to do evidence or to do truth seeking. So here's what I would love, and I think everybody would love, a full report from the FBI and DOJ explaining why they came to every conclusion that they did. Right? Just do it. Just like a full-scale conclusion with all the evidence that you can use without having... Now, I understand a lot of that is going to be reliant on saying, we see no evidence that this is the case. There is a gap in the evidence. People have speculated this. It's not true. People have speculated this. It's not true. We have no evidence of this. And conspiracy theories love to live in the gaps in the evidence. They love to live... Oh, well, just because you say that there's no evidence doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Okay, fine. But a full explanation better than that 2-page memo would be great. And, have a press conference, let people ask their questions, explain what you don't know, where there are still open questions. But in the meantime, I am not willing to call people liars who I do not believe are liars. I think that the best you can say about any of these people is that Pam Bondi radically botched the rollout of this entire case, that she was so committed to humoring people in the MAGA base who had speculated for years about Epstein, that she was saying things that went beyond what the evidence actually showed, and then she had to walk it back. But I'm not going to suggest that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and President Trump and JD Vance and Pam Bondi are all either running an op or are a victim of one. Because guess what? I don't have evidence for that. I don't. If you want to speculate about it, go ahead. But I find such speculation in the absence of evidence kind of useless. And again, if the evidence changes, I am perfectly willing and happy to change my mind. Because all I care about is that people who are guilty go to jail, particularly people who abuse children. I don't just want them to go to jail, I want them executed. That would be a proper solution here. So when more evidence emerges, I will change my mind. In the meantime, I wanted to give you a full picture of what the actual allegations are, who has said what does the evidence show, and what is just speculation. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.